Twice a year, we find ourselves adjusting our clocks, shifting an hour of daylight forward in the spring, springing forward, and falling back in the fall. For many Americans, this biannual ritual is a minor inconvenience, something we endure without giving it much thought. But when we take a closer look at the implications of changing the clocks, its impact on our economy, our health, and our everyday lives, we can see that this practice is more than an annoyance. This hearing is an excellent opportunity to examine a thoughtful and rational approach to how we manage time. Whether we lock the clock on standard time year-round or on daylight savings time, let's think carefully about our health, our economy, and well-being, and embrace a sensible approach to time management.
My bipartisan bicameral Sunshine Protection Act. It will end the twice-yearly time change and make daylight savings time the national year-round standard. I have the support of 17 of my colleagues here in the Senate and a House companion led by my friend Congressman Vern Buchanan from the great state of Florida. I'm sure all of us have heard from our constituents on this. The American people are sick and tired of changing their clocks twice a year. It's confusing, unnecessary, and completely outdated. It's an understatement to say that our nation has changed since the United States began changing the clock over a century ago. For example, American households have electricity now. We also have self-driving cars, computers, and cell phones. Now, changing the clocks twice a year proves more of an annoyance to families than a benefit to them. In 2018, when I was governor of Florida, I signed legislation that would allow the state to opt out of the practice of changing the time. And nearly 24 other states have done the same, pending federal approval that will come by passing the Sunshine Protection Act. The American people love having an extra hour of sunlight, especially in my state of Florida, where that means more time you can enjoy outdoors and activities with families. Studies also show the potential for reduced cardiac issues, stroke, and seasonal depression. Reduced robberies, benefits to the agricultural and overall economy with an extra hour of sunlight. This is a common sense change to simplify and benefit the lives of Americans. And we have a great opportunity to finally get this done with President Trump on board to lock the clock.
So let's talk a little bit about the idea of states' rights. And I've heard from groups on both sides of this issue that want either permanent standard time or permanent daylight savings time. Almost everyone agrees that changing the clock twice a year doesn't make sense. Mr. Yates, in your opening statement, you said that setting the clock is fundamentally a states' rights issue. Why do you think that decision should be left to the states?
Thank you for the question, Senator. The main reason is geography, right? Like we live on this big round ball and the sun is moving and the difference in where each state is makes a big difference in how the sunrise and sunset time applies. And so to say that there is one solution that is exactly right for Texas and the exact same solution is right for Atlanta, for Georgia, is what I would posit overreach by the federal government. And I might even go back to the example that is often cited about when the time change happened in the 70s, and just to give a little context to why that was such a failure. It's often cited that people didn't like it because there were children that were put at risk in the dark waiting for school. It turns out a lot of that is apocryphal. As we've heard, pedestrians are much safer with more light later in the day. But the thing that is interesting about that time change was, and this shows you how different politics was back in those days, that law was signed into law on December 15th, 1973, right in the middle of Watergate. You could say that maybe it was a distraction from other things that were going on, but it was enacted on December 15th on a Saturday. It was it took place on January 6th, 1974, about 3 weeks later. So you can imagine the worst Monday of the year already is the one after the holiday break where you have to go back to school and everything. To have an extra hour of sleep robbed away right before that, you can understand why it was so unpopular and why it was repealed 2 months after Nixon resigned office. So it clearly doesn't work for the federal government to come and say, this is a mandate of exactly what we should do for all of the country all at the same time. But it is the place of the Commerce Committee to say, we need a well-regulated time system, And so it makes sense to get rid of the clock changing. And if we give 2 years to the states to be able to say, so that all of these arguments can be hashed out, and they're all valid arguments, but they can be hashed out in the geography of the place where it would actually apply. And they would have time to plan and figure out what is the appropriate time for school to start to take in this evidence from neurologists, and what is the best time for all of the businesses to operate.
Dr. Johnson, you seem to disagree with having states decide on how they should lock the clock. In your judgment, why do you think that would be the wrong approach?
So time is a measure. So Congress has the control over setting measures. I think of my husband. He likes to make a joke. He's 6'6" in the morning and 6'5" in the afternoon. We don't change the length of a foot on his diurnal pattern of his height. Time is supposed to say, how the sun is moving through the sky. And so if we set it to a standard time of the sun being closer to overhead at noon, now that's something we can go by, but states then can decide how they want to set their social schedules. So instead of sort of tricking people into, you all have to get up early no matter what, let's have each state decide when they want their schools to start, when businesses want to start. But let's fix a measure of time that is actually has a meaning where the sun is overhead, and then adjust, the social schedule around it. And that is definitely something the states should decide on.
What works for East Coast states, I'm hearing from many of my constituents, might not work for states like Indiana. We have 12 counties in the western part of the state that are in the central time zone. So Evansville, Indiana, if you're familiar with that. You got up near Chicago, what we call the region affectionately. So there are 80 other counties that are in the eastern time zone. So this sort of suggests that maybe a one-size-fits-all national policy on time changes doesn't take into account the regional differences that significantly impact daily life. Leaving this decision to the states might allow local leaders who best understand their communities to weigh the specific needs of their residents. States, along this line of argument, are in a better position to evaluate how changes in daylight hours affect school schedules, commuting patterns, public safety, and economic activity. So I guess to the panel, do you believe that states like Indiana, with their unique cultures and geographical challenges and even histories as it relates to this issue, should have the flexibility to make their own decision, or do you think this decision should be standardized across the country?
Thank you, Senator Young, for the question. And I mentioned Indiana in my opening statement because it's a perfect example of why the Commerce Committee needs to approach this carefully, because to impose onto Indiana a solution that is the same as for New York and for New England is not the best interest of the people of Indiana, and it is a little bit rude. The one thing that I might say, though, is that I've never been to Indiana to testify, but I did go to Michigan to testify about their daylight saving time bill, and I went to Nebraska and to Kansas, which are states like Indiana on the western edge of their time zones, and would make the most sense for them to be in standard time. And I advocated for that with the state senators and state representatives in those states. And all of them told me that all of their constituents don't care. They would rather, like they're in the middle of the winter, they're already going to school and going to work in the dark. And they would just like to have a little bit of time after school and after work to be in the light. So I said, okay, this is your state, you get to pick.
Well, I'm no constitutional scholar for sure, but I don't see in the Constitution where it says that the federal government regulates time. I don't know if time falls under commerce, so it would naturally fall to the states if the federal government's not empowered to do so.
We have the view that everything falls under commerce.
I appreciate that. I will say, I feel it's less of a state issue than it feels like a personal issue. And the ability to do, for example, to Senator One's comments, I can simulate or practice sleep hygiene whether the sun is up or down. But I can't simulate sun hygiene. I can't light the world when we want to be out there when it's dark, right? And so I think, to me, it comes down to which choice, if you were to land on one, is going to be harder to adjust to? We are already on daylight saving time for 8 months, so we'd have to adjust for 4 months. If you reverse it, then we're adjusting 8 months of our calendar.
States like yours are more aligned with central time zones. So already on standard time, your sun is going to be overhead closer to 1. When we go to daylight savings time, now it's closer to 2. And we see that this really impacts health risks, mental health risks, safety risks, how kids do in school. I want to highlight one Indiana study. When you guys ended going the parts of the state that were on standard time.
Wait, you're coming with a study? You're citing a study? Are we allowed to do that in this? Is that consistent with the rules, Chairman Cruz? I'm kidding, of course.
So when part of Indiana ended standard time and went to seasonal daylight savings time, they found that kids' high school test scores were actually much better when they were on standard time and dropped when they switched to even seasonal daylight savings time. And that's not adding the exponential harms of bringing those 9 a.m. sunrises, like you said. So we would love every place to be more in line with the sun. And as you said, states have different, needs to get closer to that ideal.
So we didn't have a preference in our study for one time or the other in terms of how you set it. What our study showed was that the risk of fatalities for pedestrians and bicyclists in particular rises at night. And it rises for all motorists as well at night. So the real key is regardless of which decision you make and which time zone you use, you've got to make sure that you're putting interventions in that it's going to help with those who are traveling in those dark hours, whether it is more in the morning or more in the afternoon and evening. That's the real key, and particularly for pedestrians and bicyclists who are the overwhelming number of fatalities that are occurring in those dark hours.
I just want to point out that Senator Scott's bill, the Sunshine Protection Act, kind of threads the needle. It creates a federal daylight saving time, but allows every state to opt out if they chose. So I think that's maybe the best answer here.
Give us your best argument why recreational daylight is so important to your members.
My members deliver joy for a living, and they happen to run businesses making that happen. So to them, if they saw more people in the afternoons and the evenings enjoying the outdoors with each other, it's why they get out of bed. It's why they do this. So they'll have better lives as business owners. They'll be able to pay the bills a little bit better and reinvest in their businesses if they had a little bit of a boost more in the afternoons and evenings.
That was helpful, although I will say on the delivering joy, I couldn't help but think of I think the best comedy riff ever done, which is Robin Williams' on golf, which I will note is profane but screamingly funny, and he points out that golf was invented by the Scots and how infuriating it can be at time. And he said, I know, we'll call it a stroke, because when you miss, you want to have a stroke.
Very good.
All right, Dr. Johnson. Would shifting time zones slightly address the concerns for communities that are in dark zone areas if the clock were permanently set on daylight savings times? Does shifting the time zones make a difference?
So we would encourage all states to be within their sort of time zone that is closest to the sun being overhead at noon. So, for example, like Indiana being more in the central time zone versus the eastern time zone would help get them more aligned with the sun. But it should be standard time. So there has been a push on the East Coast to have us in Atlantic Standard Time. That is a time set for Bermuda. That is not the time set for any of the East Coast. So, we want permanent standard Eastern time, not permanent standard Atlantic time, which is the exact same as permanent daylight savings time.
Dr. Harkey, what has your research found as it relates to traffic accidents immediately following a time change?
So that's what we were looking at as part of our research, was in that 5-week period before and the 5-week period after the time change. And when we fall back in the fall, vehicle occupant deaths go down about 7%. And when they spring forward, vehicle occupant deaths go up about 12%. And the exact opposite with pedestrian and fatalities. So when we fall back, pedestrian and fatalities rise 13%, and then when we spring forward, they go down 24%. And so the net effect is almost zero between pedestrian and vehicle, pedestrian, bicyclist, and vehicle deaths. And so that's why our research really doesn't come out strongly in favor of either one. But what's clear is that darkness matters. And that's where we do about a quarter of our travel at night, and yet that's when 50% of the vehicle occupant deaths occur, and when more than 3/4 of the pedestrian deaths occur. So regardless of what policy decision is made with regards to the time and where we set the clocks, we have to make sure we're continuing to improve our infrastructure, continuing to improve vehicle technology that will address the safety risk that we have at night in dark conditions.
Look, this hearing was important, and I wanted to hear all this testimony because I personally struggle with the two choices here, because it's a question of what do you care about more, sunshine and joy and fun and money, or health, mental health, physical health, and the honest answer for most people is, gosh, I care about all that stuff. So that's not an easy trade-off. The alternative that has been suggested is let each state make that decision. And I guess it's been pointed out that Senator Scott's bill does a version of that by picking daylight savings times, but then letting states opt out. Let me ask, as a practical matter, does that work? Functionally, how confusing is that, having everyone pick different times? How does that work for commerce, for life, for knowing what the hell time it is?
Time is always complicated, and the system that we have, the system that we have is complicated, but it's complicated because it is a human creation, right? The sun moving around the earth doesn't actually have anything to do with time. Time is the agreement that we have about what 10 o'clock means, because we don't want to go around saying, the committee hearing will start when the sun is 2 hands above the horizon. We need this system. But the system has this bug right now, and the bug is daylight saving time. It's the switching of the clocks. And so if we have a little bit of time, a couple of years, so that the individual states can address all of these complexities and make those decisions, then we will be able to get rid of this bug permanently. It's something that we've been stuck with since World War I, and this is our opportunity to finally fix it.
Mr. Karen?
I'm not going to say that government solutions cause more confusion, but you can imagine in this scenario that Florida is on daylight saving time, Georgia right above it's on standard, South Carolina is on daylight, et cetera, in the same spot because maybe special interests of all kinds made that happen. So I already have problems remembering which state is in which time zone as it is right now, sometimes the border states. To add to that, they're in central and they're on standard. What time is it there exactly? So I can see where this causes more confusion. Wish I had a better answer for you on that one, but could we adjust and figure that out quickly? I don't know. I see it as problematic, but it may be the only way to thread the needle.
Yeah, I think, the economy, the transportation industry certainly needs consistency and alignment. So we want to make this change once. We don't want to pick something that's tried and been failed twice before, such that we spend lots of money fixing it again in a few years. You mentioned the economy, which again, is so important. And, the majority of our workers start work early. The average work start time is 7:55 in the morning. So we'd be forcing people all winter to go to work in the dark, really affecting their productivity and economics. And so while, certain businesses are going to have different, benefits of the sun, I actually do want to give sun to people when they use it to get up, when they use it to be healthy, when they use it to be more productive and efficient at work, and to improve the overall economy, not just niche, businesses like the golf industry that have shown they can be very successful in standard time, like in Arizona.
Strictly speaking, from a road safety perspective, I'm not sure it would make any difference if states had the right to select the time, because it's about the amount of light, the amount of ambient light during the times of travel. And so I don't think it would have an impact. Personally, it would probably confuse me, but we had that problem. I will give you a quick anecdote. Almost 40 years ago, we were collecting speed data in New Mexico and Arizona as part of a research study. Had no idea at that time, being right out of school, hadn't really paid attention, that Arizona did not bother to go to daylight savings times. That all of our equipment was an hour off when we went to pick up all the speed data, and we had to adjust it after the fact. And so I think you would have those kinds of things, right, that could work their way into the system, unintentional mistakes, if we were to get into a system where we had a lot of different time zones going on.